A lot has happened since I last preached 2 weeks ago. There's been some disequilibrium in the world. On the political front, someone attempted to assassinate the former president. And a week later, our current president dropped out of the race, and the vice president took his place at the top of the ticket. On the church front, a week ago, a Virginia Mennonite Conference had a consequential delegate session in which, sadly, 10 congregations withdrew from the conference, and 2 congregations closed their doors permanently. But we also welcomed a new congregation in formation, and a vote was taken, anticipated for over a year, to reaffirm our connection with Mennonite Church USA. It just needed a majority, but passed with 75%, reassuring many of us, but no doubt causing some disequilibrium for some others. And pay attention to your email. The next day or two, you'll be getting a brief report from us by email with more details on that. Meanwhile, Park View is undergoing a complicated and multi-phased leadership transition. It's going well so far, I think, but it can be a little unsettling. On the personal front, our daughter and son-in-law and 2 grandchildren are moving back to Harrisonburg this week. And 3 days ago, I officially became a senior citizen. Oh, and there's a retirement happening in there somewhere, end of August, or maybe it's April. Inside joke for those who were here last Sunday. What we tend to do in times of uncertainty, anxiety, or disequilibrium is we tend to gravitate toward whatever's reliable and predictable and hang on for dear life. I see it in our politics. I see it in our culture wars. I see it in our conference and denominational struggles. I see it in the lives of families in transition. I see it in myself. And it's not all bad. Grasping for something that's steady can be healthy or unhealthy. Our mental and emotional health can actually benefit from having something familiar to hold close to us while we shift, then navigate the shifting ground that's under our feet. So toddlers might need a stuffed animal. Adults might need a brisk walk around the same block at the same time every evening. But we can also veer into unhealthy ways of trying to steady the shifting ground underneath us. Sometimes we oversimplify and categorize and label both things and people. That's usually easier than dealing with nuance in ideas or complexity in people. It takes a lot less energy to just dismiss someone as a MAGA hothead or a left-wing nutcase and just walk away from them than it does to deal with their full humanity and to welcome their story. All this is to say, I found the words of 1 John 3 to be some much-needed words for us. Fresh air blowing into a stuffy room where it's sometimes hard to breathe these days. This epistle is a good reminder for any of us who have gotten caught up in the anxieties of our day, of our nation, of our culture, of our church, of our families, and are starting to suffocate in it. It's a call to find our spiritual and relational grounding in the deep, deep love of God. The love of God for us and the love of God for all whom God has made. The writer says, we know love by this, that Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for others. How does God's love abide in anyone who has the world's goods and sees a brother or sister in need and yet refuses to help? Little children, let us love in word, not in word or speech, but in deed and in truth. We will know love by our capacity to embody that love in the most challenging of relationships with real, live, breathing human beings. Those who are like us and those who are unlike us, all who God made in love in God's own image and likeness. The other night, or I should say the other morning, sometime around 3 a.m., I woke up and had some trouble getting back to sleep. No one reason, maybe something I ate, something on my mind. Now, this might not work for everybody, but what helps me get back to sleep is reading a philosophical essay. I subscribe to an online philosophy journal, which is quite interesting in the daytime. But at night, with my device on dark mode and the color off so it doesn't trick my melatonin, I'll read some deep esoteric thoughts for 15 or 20 minutes, and soon my eyelids get heavy and I go back to sleep. It slows down my brain. But the other morning, the essay I read was a little too interesting and too connected to 1 John 3, so I used up most of an hour reading it. Didn't help my sleep, but it helped my sermon prep. The author was philosophy professor Bennett Gilbert, writing about the philosophy of personalism. He said that philosophy inspired Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream of a better world, and said it could inspire us as well in these fraught times in which we live. The essay was published just 5 days ago, so I'm guessing Gilbert had in mind even the events of these last 2 weeks. Simply put, the philosophy of personalism says that reality begins with the individual person and with personal consciousness, to which we attach the most profound worth. Some philosophers use metaphysics and other non-religious models to develop their personalism philosophy, but some, the author noted, develop it through the theologies of the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Islam, Christianity. And Martin Luther King Jr. studied under professors at Boston University who were renowned for their work on the philosophy of personalism. Gilbert started out the article with a quote from King's book titled, "Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community?" King was in an airport terminal after the march from Selma to Montgomery, and looking out over the sea of people there who came to Montgomery to support them. And later, King wrote about that moment, "As I stood with them and saw white and Negro, nuns and priests, ministers and rabbis, labor organizers, lawyers, doctors, housemaids, and shop workers, brimming with vitality and enjoying a rare comradeship, I knew I was seeing a microcosm of the mankind of the future in this moment of luminous and genuine brotherhood." Now, Gilbert surmised that King's study of the philosophy of personalism inspired that observation. And then he quoted some lines from King's PhD dissertation in which he wrote, "Only a personal being can be good. Goodness in the true sense of the word is an attribute of personality. The same is true of love. Outside of personality, love loses its meaning. What we love deeply is persons. We love in the concrete. A process may generate love, but the love is directed primarily not toward the process, but toward the persons who generate that process." Gilbert summarized King's thinking this way. He said, "King subordinates everything to the flourishing of human persons because goodness in this world has no home other than that of persons. Their well-being is what makes the events of our lives and our collective history worthy of effort and care." Now, I hear echoes of 1 John 3 in that. Let us love not in word or speech, but in deed and truth. It is important and worthwhile to love ideas and pursue our ideals. I have long called us as a church to think clearly and to think carefully and to think critically. But if we are to be faithful conduits of the love of God, our love of ideas has to bow to our love of persons. Let me repeat, because I think that's kind of crucial for the polarized times in which we live. Our love of ideas has to bow to our love of persons. This does not diminish in any way the importance of critical thinking. It just clarifies the starting point. 1 John 3, and apparently the philosophy of personalism, say that the starting point of our moral obligation is the real and concrete person, not an abstract idea or ideology. God created all human beings in love and placed in all human beings the divine image, even in persons who we might regularly label with derogatory nicknames. It's going to get worse, folks. The call for unity after the attempted assassination 2 weeks ago lasted for about 2 minutes. People are right back to name-calling and dehumanizing. As the struggle for political victory gets more intense leading up to November, we, the church, can walk a different path. We can choose to see past the baseball cap and t-shirts and bumper stickers and see a human being that God loves. A human being of inherent worth and value. A human being with a life story. Now, that doesn't mean there isn't time for public protest or vocal messaging of matters of great and moral urgency. The call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, I think, is such a time. And I fully support those connected to Mennonite Action marching peacefully to Washington this week, letting their voice be heard. I also fully trust that they will share their message without dehumanizing or dismissing real persons. I expect their long walk will also lead to some long talks with people who don't share their particular beliefs or convictions. And those talks can be a win for everyone. So my challenge to us all this morning, and I think the challenge of 1 John 3, is to get personal. Get personal. Ideas are important, and we should keep on thinking clearly and speaking clearly. But let's keep the focus where it belongs, on the well-being of the person who is loved by God without condition and without limit. Now, our response to people, of course, depends on the circumstances. But the person in front of us will still be in focus. Whether they are in poverty and need our tangible help, as the example in 1 John 3:17, or whether they are struggling with life in some other way and just need to be listened to, or whether they are acting out of fear and anxiety and need a calm person to just look into their eyes and see them, or whether even they are actively attacking us or our values. However the situation presents itself, they are still fundamentally a human being that God loves. On some rare occasions, we might need, for our own safety, to protect ourselves or run for cover, or simply disengage from an unhealthy conversation. That's valid. But even then, we can choose to see the other as a human being of worth. We may not be the ones able to look them in the eyes and communicate that to them, but we can still choose not to dehumanize them, and thus deepen the wounds that we all suffer from together. Now, that will take lots of discipline, lots of practice, lots of patience as the election day draws near and after election day is over, regardless of outcome. It will also require us who seek to live this way to lean on each other for support and not depend on mass media or memes or viral videos to figure out how to live well. We need to get personal together. So let's stay together and keep working at it and keep trusting God in the midst of it. There is a confession, which I don't have on me, but I'm going to lead us through it now. God, you who love your children with an everlasting love, forgive us for failing to see your image in other persons. When ideas lead us to build walls and categorize persons, when they obscure our ability to see real persons or hear real stories, forgive us for failing to see persons as you see them. The ever-loving God forgives us and forgives all who fall short of our calling and invites us near, saying, "Leave behind your cares and strife. Come to me. I will give you rest.